What are some keys to having a good relationship with your kid, like you've shown in the Arweave world?
Yeah, he's I think a lot of that is, I guess before I give my answer, a lot of it's him. I mean, he, most kids, his age, and I guess I can still say kids, but I know when I was his age, I didn't want my parents, involved in my hobbies, for the most part. There are things that we shared, loves for, but but with him, he's just been so, generous with his time. I mean, I know when he started going to conferences, in high school, he missed his high school graduation because of a conference. It was one of those strange dynamics as a parent, as, okay, we know that he's, kind of becoming an adult, but are we okay with him, going around the world on his own?
You're tuned to the ArCast, where we talk about the blockchain on the ArCast and how your data remains. It's the ArCast, where Arweave is the topic, censorship-resistant permanence. Yeah, we got it. Hey friends, it's Andrew, back with episode 16 of the ArCast. That's what's up. This week I'm talking to Joe Berenbaum about his project AFTR.Protocol. And it was a really cool conversation. Joe's son Tate has done a lot for the Arweave ecosystem. This episode explores a lot of different topics. We learn about Joe's career before he started working in the Arweave ecosystem. We talk about how Web3 kind of helped bring him and his son close together as collaborators, especially during the quarantine, and what he thinks Web3 means for the future and how this informs his view as a parent. So it was a really cool interview. I'd met Joe at the ArDrive marketing meetup earlier this year, and we kept in touch, and it was just cool to talk to him because he's a interesting guy with a unique perspective. So Joe, thank you for being on the ArCast. If you missed it, Inferno is going strong. We slightly adjusted some of the rules to make it even more amazing. So if you have data, upload it because we will reward you with tokens. You can check in on the Discord for the new rules, and I promise you will not be disappointed. So let's jump into it. This is my interview with Joe Berenbaum right here on the ArCast. Yeah. All right, friends, welcome to the ArCast. Today I'm talking to Joe Berenbaum, who is remotely conversing with us in Virginia, and we have a lot of interesting things to talk about today. Joe is definitely a big figure in the Arweave community. Anyone who's been to the Arweave build sessions will have seen him presented and know about his work. So before we get started, Joe, how are you doing today?
Good, thanks. Thanks for having me, Andrew. Looking forward to talking with you.
We had the chance to hang out when we were having the ArDrive marketing meeting. You and your son came and hung out with us, and we had lunch, but we had a good conversation. I was wondering if you could reiterate to the listeners, what is your background? How did you get involved in computing in general?
Sure. Yeah. I guess I could probably take the whole podcast with this story time here, so I'll try not to do that. So yeah, I majored in computer engineering, coming out of college, and so that's, I guess, it was kind of a technology guy to start. I started doing software development, kind of in working for a great company. I worked for GE, which was one of the hot companies, back when I was coming out of school, and really, just kind of fell in love with the idea of being able to see things come to fruition very quickly. And then, kind of shortly after, I guess, or shortly into my career, the .com boom, kind of hit, I guess it was hitting while I was in college. And then I kind of noticed it as I was starting my career. So, I spent about 5 years at kind of what I define as corporate America, just big business, technology, working at GE. And my college roommate had started this company and convinced me to come join them. And that was my first, I guess, introduction to the startup I don't want to say lifestyle, because it wasn't, the sexy lifestyle that you read about back then. But it's kind of a life of, you don't have the support that you have in the bigger companies or, anything like that. It's kind of just grassroots effort to, especially a non-venture funded startup, but a grassroots effort to kind of, be successful. Learned a whole lot through that process. We had really, really good technology. And we were actually starting this business at a time when the bubble was getting ready to burst. So VCs didn't really want to talk to us. We weren't in an area where we were, where we could network a lot. We were kind of, in small town Virginia. So that, we didn't have a lot of connections outside of that. And, when I finally left that company, I went to a software company that wasn't really a startup. They'd established themselves. That they were still early on, but they weren't funded by anybody. They had a really good product. And I started, kind of taking a look at what was around me and saying, all of these people, and at the time I was doing some consulting through that company with other small businesses that were using our software. And so what I was realizing was, all these small businesses had the same problems that we had in the startup environment. And we just didn't know that these are common problems. And then, you just kind of have to solve them as you go. And so I really look back on that and with a lot of, I don't know, just great memories and just, it was just a time of learning for me. And then, spent, I don't know, several years there. And then I ended up back in corporate America again at Capital One, which is a fantastic company, and really got to learn a new industry, with banking and financial services. And the cool thing about Capital One was, they have the ability to recruit just an incredible talent base, so I was constantly amazed by all the talent that was around me, and it's a really fun place to work. And then, during my time at Capital One, I worked on it was like a competition that, it was come up with an idea and start to build, form your team and start to build this idea. And then, we'll select the best ideas. And, through that journey, I realized that, man, I really like this building, that you don't really get in these big companies. And so that was kind of my first real, I guess, epiphany that, I need to be, building things from scratch. That's what I really enjoy doing. And so, I guess enter, my son, Tate. Most of your listeners probably know him. At least for a while, I think on my Twitter name was Joe. Yes, we're related. Because that was kind of the conversations that I was having with people. They wouldn't know me, and that we would get on the phone and they would say, "Well, wait a minute, are you?" Yes, we're related. So I guess he was probably, I don't know, eighth or ninth grader at the time, and he convinced me to help him with a side project, and it turned into this platform that we were really passionate about. It was a platform that we called Fun Fund, and what it was almost like a GoFundMe inside of mobile apps. So the idea is that a user could go, or somebody could go out and create a campaign like you would on GoFundMe, but then app developers could subscribe to those campaigns and put those inside their apps. And so, like, for example, a mobile game might have a tournament, and the entry into that tournament, might cost $1. And so part of that dollar would go to the game developer, and the other part would go to, the person running the campaign for that cause. And it was a really neat time because it kind of got me programming again. I hadn't done that in a while, and kind of updated my technology expertise, so to speak. And then, after we had finished our MVP, it was the summer, and we started going to the next phase of that, which was kind of shopping the product around, because we had this this two-pronged problem that many platforms face, where in order to get customers, you have to have the other side of the equation, and vice versa. It's kind of cart before the horse kind of thing. And so we started trying to reach out to game developers, and nobody would really talk to us. And what we ended up learning was that a lot of the games that made sense for this platform were what were called hyper casual games. The games that people play all day long. Just kind of pick up their phone and pass time and play. And in some ways, it's a perfect. It was a perfect route for this technology, because they had tournaments in those games. And but what we learned was that just a handful of publishers kind of own that industry, and the way that they or I guess the revenue model is kind of a rinse and repeat. They might pay $1 for a customer, but then they make $1.50 off that customer. So it's just a rinse and repeat volume game. And so they didn't really care about an additional revenue stream, and so Tate started back at school, and I kind of started on to other projects, so we kind of let that die. But the cool thing about that was it was kind of this father son creation thing, and it was kind of like our thing that we would do, and I just remember that it was just so much fun, being able to do that with them. And then I guess about a year later, he started a project called Nest.land, which is a kind of a story in itself, but that was his first project on Arweave. And this, that really, I guess a portion of that really resonated with me and got me excited. And this probably would resonate with you as well, Andrew, being from the music industry. But the Nest.land, what was basically is a package manager, much like NPM for Node, but Nest.land focused on a programming language called Dino. And the piece that really resonated with me was that this concept of a software developer could release a piece of code and then get paid on the or I guess get royalties on that code for the value that, or for the usage that value or usage, however you want to look at it, but for the value that it's generating in the ecosystem, which kind of like the music industry. If you write a song, you get paid on those royalties. And so with the release of Arweave's profit sharing communities, that kind of enabled that technology and that opportunity. And so that was just absolutely fascinating to me. It's kind of like the gig economy on steroids. And so I guess COVID hit, and so Tate started spending a lot of time at home, as I guess with remote school, and I was working remotely, and that project morphed into another project called Verto. And that's when things started taking off, and getting pretty tough for him, trying to go to school and launch a project like Verto at the same time. But it really led to a lot of conversation and ideas, between the two of us, bouncing ideas off each other. And that's kind of where my project after, was born.
Blockchain as a technology is something that connected your current career focus and your work with your son. And it goes back to your earlier work, because as I understand it, you were kind of in this interesting space that was like an amalgamation of finance and coding, right? It seems like that you were kind of in those two worlds.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I was kind of at the intersection of technology and product development, really, in financial services. And ironically, at Capital One, the products that I supported were treasury management products. And so it's kind of ironic that, AFTR.Market is a treasury management protocol.
So that's a good inroad into into AFTR.Market. For those of you who missed Joe's presentation at the Arweave build, let's see, Joe, I'll give you my understanding of it and you can correct me.
Sure.
So it's a way of having DAO tokens, putting them together and having sort of like collective treasuries that you can share with other users, almost like a multi-sig wallet. Instead of just having one token that generates Arweave in one capacity, you have a few, and then you can decide together what these collections of tokens can do and how to vote together and how to like bring your powers together for interesting results. Is that close?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because the original idea of what After became was not really treasury management at all. And it's kind of funny for where we started. I mean, it almost started as looking like I guess something that people can understand are mutual funds, right? It's just grouping stocks together. Well, that's kind of what After started as, a mechanism that could do that. And then as we started talking about what it would take to build that, we started talking about some of the benefits of this technology. And that's to me what was really exciting was, this is, just a really small Lego brick of things that can be, or foundational level architecture of where other projects can come in and build on top of it. And so what you described was really the first use case. And that is, I guess I'll back up for a second and start talking about like when I entered the Open Web Foundry, I was excited about all the things that After could do. But what I learned really quickly was that when you start talking about this technology, people didn't really get it. I think one of my first presentations, it was one of the Open Web Foundry community calls where you kind of present your idea and then you chat with people afterwards. And then one of the guys came to my table and he was really complimentary, it was really nice. And he's like, "Hey, this is really cool. You did a great job, but I don't get it." And so that kind of told me, okay, I need to talk in use cases that people have problems for right now. And so that's kind of what you were describing. And the first problem, the first obvious problem in the Arweave ecosystem was that, for this technology problem, this technology could solve, I should say, was around treasury management. And so as projects, come into the ecosystem and start minting millions of tokens, how do they govern those? And then as users start, collecting, tokens, from various projects, how do they secure those? And so, what we realized was, the need for treasury management was real. And when people understood, Gnosis Safe and Ethereum. And so when, you would start telling people about what I would tell people what I was working on, and they would, some people would say, "Oh, kind of like Gnosis Safe." And I was like, yes, kind of like Gnosis Safe. And so then the light bulb would go off. And so I think, that's where we've started. We put together a platform that allows people to, manage tokens. But to me, the exciting thing about this is what comes after. I used to have that in my pitch. I'm excited about what comes after. And I remember when I was going over my demo day pitch with Seb, he kind of read that on a slide and he stumbled across it, and I could see the confusion on his face. And he kind of looked at me and he was like, "Yeah, that's kind of clunky. Take that out." I was like, "But that's the exciting part. It's what are we going to do with this technology? Because there's so many cool things under the hood that can be utilized here."
Yeah, and it's because it's also new, right? And it's also interesting that like there's this generational divide where your son and the younger Gen Alpha or whatever they're calling the younger people in the community, yeah. they kind of grew up with a lot of this language. And here you are, someone from both worlds explaining it. Do you think people understand the concept of a DAO? Like if you were to talk to friends of yours from college who aren't in the blockchain space, does that make sense to them? Is it something that feels like a new language that's different,
I think it's the latter. But I think if you spend any time, kind of looking at crypto or getting involved, or a lot of people like to say going down the rabbit hole, um, you quickly understand what DAOs are. Um, but I think when we talk about some of the terminology that we use on aftermarket, it's funny because when I was first putting that together, I didn't use DAO as the kind of the owners of the vehicle. We called them
Mm.
members. So yeah, I think it is. It's some of that kind of multi-generational, terminology coming into play there. But really, what we were trying to go after was that we really wanted to design a user interface that you could customize and not really have to know how the contracts work or how they're supposed to be governed, but that you could structure their governance in an easiest possible manner.
Okay, good. That's interesting. And it's also a question you talked about how with any sort of adoption, there is this role of education, this role of onboarding people, this role of showing why something is useful. And if it's easy to use and intuitive, it sometimes the marketing can be a lot easier. So I'm curious if you think that in your time in the Arweave ecosystem, have you been seeing a change in the type of people who are curious about a project like AfterMarket or curious about using our drive as the platforms become more adopted, do you think the people involved in this space has diversified, or what do you think?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's interesting because I think we're seeing certainly different types of people that are coming into the ecosystem, and a lot of them are coming from another ecosystem, like Ethereum or one of the more popular ones. So you're kind of seeing people asking the question. Actually, I think it's more of they see Arweave as a storage blockchain. And it's really good at that, and so they're coming up with solutions that might be expensive on another blockchain, but then kind of leveraging that with or utilizing Arweave to kind of make it more economical. So we're seeing some of that. I think then some of the people that I'll say are being recruited into the ecosystem. Are kind of coming in with some problems that are happening in Web 2 and seeing that Arweave can solve those problems with the Web 3 solution. You start talking about the Twitter clones coming into Arweave. That's just a natural type of a lot of people kind of think of that instantly. And a lot of different social media platforms I've seen being talked about. So yeah, I don't know. I guess that's what I'm seeing right now. And it'll be interesting to see as things like Arweave build become more prevalent, and they start. I guess that the audience starts growing. I think we'll see some different aspects as well.
Joe, what I like about the Arweave community is that it's still small enough where we all kind of know each other and we're all aware of what we're working on in our different places in the ecosphere. But it's also big enough that there's always new people at these meetups and the gather towns. So it almost feels like being at like a mid-sized college. You know what I mean? Like we're all trying to learn. We're all trying to learn from each other. But it's not like a huge giant city, whereas the Ethereum community might seem more like that. So I wonder if you think a lot about the future and like the legacy that your work will leave for your kids and for the future generations. What are some keys to having a good relationship with your kid, like you've shown in the Arweave world?
Yeah, he's I think a lot of that is, I guess before I give my answer, a lot of it's him. I mean, he most kids, his age, and I guess I can still say kids. But I know when I was his age, I didn't want my parents, involved in my hobbies. For the most part, there are things that we shared, loves for, but but with him, he's just been so generous with his time. I know when he started going to conferences, in high school, he missed his high school graduation because of a conference. It was one of those strange dynamics as a parent, as okay, we know that he's kind of becoming an adult, but are we okay with him going around the world on his own, because it doesn't really feel like it's okay. So and I think he made that easy. He didn't kind of rebel against us or whatever. He communicated and he included us in that. So I think a lot of it's him. But from a parent perspective, I think that it's really important to just be supportive of your kids' passions, especially if you have the opportunity, or if your kid has the opportunity to find their passion. That's just really special, and it doesn't happen. I don't, at his age, I don't think I had a passion. I had things I liked to do, but they weren't things that I'm thinking, hey, I can make a career out of this, and, so I think that, a lot of times, sometimes, as adults, we kind of miss that in our kids. And so I think to always encourage them to, do what you love, it's just so important.
That is really cool. And it's interesting when there's this intersection of when the thing that you love has an energy around it and excitement around it, and it's new, and you're in the forefront of like helping drive that culture forward. That's really special. And that you could recognize that and encourage it is a good lesson, because 20 years ago, talking about a decentralized storage solution like Arweave, it might have seemed kind of like science fiction, right? Yeah. Like, how is that even possible?
Yeah. Well, just when I think you were on the call the other day when I mentioned this, but when Amazon was released, when they launched, right? If they said, "Hey, we're going to disrupt brick and mortar retail," people would have just laughed. But when they say, "Hey, we're going to sell books over the internet," I think people are like, "Okay, yeah, that's a little crazy, but I guess you could do that," And then, sure enough, they disrupted, their brick and mortar retail. So it kind of feels, very similar.
Yeah, it feels similar, and there's this constant debate of like, okay, the first web boom had this kind of like the bubble popped. Is it going to happen with crypto, or has it happened, or is it going to like down the line? Like, do you feel like we are at we've reached a bubble, or do you feel like there's a ways to go, or is it kind of too hard to tell? Because I know you have a lot of experience in these worlds.
Yeah, it feels like an evolution to me. Even people describe the .com bubble. They describe it as a boom or a burst, I guess. But really, if you look back and you see what came out of that, well, Web 2 came out of that. Facebook was born out of that, right? That was the start of Web 2. So I just kind of see this as an evolution. But the blockchain and crypto has been around now for a while. Now people are just starting to pay attention. It's becoming mainstream. So I really, and just like there's so many examples of this in different industries. But I remember, I was talking to, my wife's in real estate, and I think I was talking to an experienced realtor, I think when she got into the business, and I was saying, yeah, the economy's it looks like it's going to be a downturn coming up. How do you, as a realtor, how do you deal with that? And I remember he said, he's like, I love it. He's like, because what happens is, all these people that have gotten in the business and kind of flooded our market, are going to get out. And he's like, and then the people that kind of stick around are the ones that are, are going to benefit from that. And if you kind of extrapolate that to other industries, whenever there's a downturn, that's always a time of great innovation. So I feel, and the people that stay around and stick around are the ones that truly see that. And I think that's when, some of the great, great products and projects, kind of come to life.
It makes me think of aftermarket, right? Like post, what happens after the market changes? And it makes me think, I always think in terms of music metaphors sometimes when I think about cultural memes and the way culture shifts. And I think about how if that example applies to, if you look at the story of Nirvana, right? Like punk rock and thrash music kind of was out of fashion in the late 80s, but it influenced this band, which then took it and made grunge, and it became popular in a whole nother way. It's like a way of like good ideas that stick around by people who stay dedicated to them sometimes have an unexpected result. And I think that's like the upside of a downturn market. You can end up influencing a whole generation of music fans. You can end up building a platform that changes the world. And so we'll see where it all goes. And what I really like about doing the ArCast is we have these permanent dialogues of speculation and these first person accounts. So we'll go back and we'll listen. We'll be like, oh yeah, they predicted something would happen.
Yeah. I don't know what to think about that, but I guess that's good, right?
Yeah, I think it's fun to have that this platform, the Permacast network and everything. I really enjoy doing this and talking to influential people in the community. Joe, is there anything like you want to promote? Let's send people to the AfterMarket Twitter or anything else we can plug to help spread the word.
Yeah, sure. Twitter's a great place to get started. And it's AfterMarket. It's AFTR. It's an acronym actually. And then AfTR.Market is the main site. And then from there you can get to what we call the playground. We just launched that recently. That's our test net. And the purpose of that is, I guess it's several things. One is to get people familiar with the technology and its usefulness. But then two, to really test some of the integration that we have under the hood. We're integrated with a couple of other Arweave projects, and so and some of their technology is new as well. So it's a really nice way to kind of test that out and kind of work out the kinks while we're learning about how our users are going to use the platform. So and then I guess third, it's kind of a community growth strategy. To kind of introduce the product and get people to get on there and start giving us growing our community, but giving us the feedback that we're looking for.
Please check that out. Joe is on Twitter. It's Joe, just at Joe Berenbaum. Yeah, and maybe we'll see you at one of the future ArDrive community meetups. Joe, thank you so much. Hopefully we'll talk to you again, and I appreciate your time and I appreciate your great perspective.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Andrew. I really appreciate your time and all the things that or the efforts that you do to promote all the projects in Arweave.
Well, thank you, Joe, and this has been a great conversation. So we'll talk to you soon. Thank you, Joe. I appreciate you being on the show. There are a lot of exciting things happening with RIO, so be sure to stay tuned. We posted some new tutorial videos on YouTube and on our social media channels. There's one I did with Ariel, the CTO, about manifests, how you can use them. A lot of exciting content coming. So be sure to check in with us on Discord and tune in 2 weeks. And remember, know before you stow. That's what's up. Thank you, Joe. I'm Andrew. We'll see you soon.